The November wind cut through Martha Henderson's worn coat like 1,000 tiny knives as she hurried down Main Street, her arms laden with groceries she could barely afford. 3 years had passed since Tom's accident at the lumber mill. 3 years of scraping by on what little his life insurance had left after the medical bills devoured most of it. She kept her head down, partly against the cold, partly to avoid the pitying glances from neighbors who'd once envied her happy marriage and comfortable life. That's when she nearly tripped over him. The man sat hunched against the brick wall of Ferguson's Hardware, his back to the wind, a tattered blanket pulled around shoulders that had once been broad and strong. Most people would have stepped around him, perhaps dropped $1 in the coffee can at his feet. But Martha Henderson had never been most people, and something about the way he held himself, despite the obvious poverty, made her pause. "Sir?" she called softly. "Are you all right?" He looked up slowly, and for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Impossible. Martha didn't know any homeless men. His face was weathered and lined, hidden partly by an unkempt beard, but his eyes were a startling blue, clear and intelligent despite his circumstances. "I'm managing, ma'am," he said, his voice rough but educated. Not the voice she'd expected. "Just resting a spell before I move on." Martha glanced at the darkening sky. The weather forecast called for the first real freeze of the season tonight. She thought of her own warm house, too big now for just one person, with Tom's old room sitting empty upstairs. She thought of the man she'd married, who'd never passed a person in need without helping. She thought of the woman she'd been before grief and hardship had worn her down, the woman who'd believed in showing kindness even when life showed you none. "When did you last eat?" she asked. The man hesitated. "Day before yesterday, I reckon." The decision made itself. "I've got a guest room that's not being used, and I made too much pot roast last night. I hate to see it go to waste." His eyes widened slightly. "Ma'am, I couldn't impose. It's no imposition if I'm offering," Martha said firmly, using the same tone that had once convinced her daughter to eat her vegetables. "Besides, there's a storm coming. I won't sleep tonight knowing I left someone out in this cold when I had a warm bed sitting empty." She extended her hand. After a long moment, he took it, and she helped pull him to his feet. He stood a full head taller than her, and despite the ragged clothes and obvious hunger, there was something dignified about him. "Name's Jack," he said quietly. "Jack Morrison, Martha Henderson. Come on, my car's just around the corner." As they walked through the small Texas town, Martha felt the stares following them. She could almost hear the gossip starting already. The widow Henderson bringing home a vagrant. What would people say? But she'd stopped caring about that kind of talk when she'd had to sell Tom's truck to pay the electric bill. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford, and neither was indifference to suffering. Her house sat at the edge of town, a white two-story with a wraparound porch that needed painting. The garden that had once been her pride now grew wild, more weeds than flowers. She led Jack through the front door into a home that was clean but sparse, the furniture old but well-maintained. "Bathroom's through there," she said, pointing down the hall. "There are towels in the cabinet, and I think there's some of my husband's old clothes in the guest room closet. They might fit you. You get cleaned up while I heat up dinner." Jack stood in her entryway, looking around with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Henderson, I want you to know I appreciate this more than I can say. I promise you won't regret your kindness." Something in his voice made her look at him more closely, but his face gave nothing away. She nodded and headed to the kitchen, listening to his footsteps on the stairs, the creak of the old floorboards in the guest room. She reheated the pot roast and set the table for two, something she hadn't done since her daughter Lisa had visited last Christmas. When Jack came back down 20 minutes later, Martha nearly dropped the serving spoon. Clean-shaven and wearing Tom's old flannel shirt and jeans, he looked almost like a different person. The years showed on his face, lines etched deep around his eyes and mouth, but there was something familiar about him now, something that tugged at the edges of her memory. "You clean up nice," she said, trying to place where she might have seen him before. "Thank you, ma'am. And thank you for the clothes." They sat down to dinner, and for a while the only sound was the clink of silverware on plates. Jack ate slowly, deliberately, like a man who'd learned not to take food for granted. Martha found herself studying him between bites, that nagging sense of familiarity growing stronger. "Have we met before?" she finally asked. "There's something about you that seems—" Jack set down his fork, and for a moment she thought she saw pain flash across his face. "Long time ago, maybe." "Another lifetime. Where are you from originally?" "Here and there. Spent a lot of years in Montana, working ranches." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "But I grew up not far from here, actually. Left when I was young, thought I'd make my fortune elsewhere. And did you?" A bitter smile crossed his face, in a manner of speaking. "Though I learned the hard way that fortune and happiness aren't always the same thing." Martha wanted to ask more, but something in his expression stopped her. Everyone had their stories, their pain. She of all people understood the need to keep some things private. "Well, you're welcome to stay until you figure out your next step," she said. "The guest room's yours as long as you need it. I could use some help around the place anyway, if you're willing to work for your keep. The porch needs fixing, and the garden's gotten away from me." Jack met her eyes, and in them she saw something that looked almost like hope. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Henderson." That night, after Jack had retired to the guest room, Martha sat in her living room with a cup of tea, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Through the heating vent, she could hear him moving around upstairs, and the house felt less empty than it had in years. She picked up the photograph of Tom that sat on the mantel, his smile forever frozen at 35. "I hope I'm doing the right thing," she whispered to the image. "He seems like a good man down on his luck. Something about him, Tom, something I can't quite put my finger on." Upstairs, Jack Morrison stood at the window of the guest room, looking out at the town he'd left 40 years ago. The street where Martha now lived had been farmland then, and she'd been Martha Sullivan, the prettiest girl in the senior class. He'd been Jackson Thornton Morrison, the ranch hand's son, too poor and too proud to tell her how he felt before he'd left to make something of himself. He'd succeeded beyond his wildest dreams, building an empire of ranches across 3 states. But success had come at a cost. A failed marriage, estranged children, and a heart attack that made him question everything. When his doctor had ordered him to reduce stress and reconnect with what mattered, Jack had made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He'd walked away from it all, wanting to find out who he was when you stripped away the money and the power. He'd ended up here, drawn back to his roots, never expecting to find her. Martha Sullivan, now Martha Henderson. Still beautiful, though life had clearly been hard on her. Still kind, as evidenced by the fact that she'd taken him in. He'd recognized her immediately, though she hadn't known him. Why would she? He'd been a skinny, awkward kid when he left. She'd never even known he existed, not really. Tomorrow, he told himself, he'd tell her the truth. But tonight, he'd simply be grateful for her kindness, and for this unexpected second chance to be near the woman who'd haunted his dreams for 40 years. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains of the guest room, and Jack woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, he forgot where he was, then remembered. Martha's house. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 40 years building an empire, lived in mansions with more rooms than he could count, and yet this simple guest room felt more like home than any of them. He found Martha in the kitchen, already dressed in jeans and an old sweater, her gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked up from the stove and smiled, and his heart did something it hadn't done in decades. "Hope you like your eggs scrambled," she said. "I wasn't sure, so I made them the way I usually do." "Scrambled's perfect," Jack said, taking a seat at the small kitchen table. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "No trouble. I was cooking anyway." She set a plate in front of him, loaded with eggs, bacon, and toast. "I figured after breakfast, if you're still willing, you could take a look at that porch. I've got most of the materials already." "Tom bought them before," she trailed off, her smile faltering. "I'd be happy to," Jack said quickly, wanting to erase the sadness that had crept into her eyes. As they ate, Martha told him about the town, how it had changed over the years, businesses that had come and gone. Jack listened, occasionally asking questions, careful not to reveal how much he already knew. He remembered Sullivan's General Store, where her father had worked. It was a bank now. He remembered the old drive-in theater on Route 9, now a strip mall. "You said you grew up around here?" Martha asked, refilling his coffee cup. "What was your family name?" "Maybe I knew them." Jack's hand tightened on his fork. This was it, the moment he should tell her, but the words stuck in his throat. "Morrison," he said finally, "but we left when I was young." "You wouldn't have known us." It wasn't technically a lie. The Morrisons had been nobodies, the kind of people that Martha Sullivan, with her middle-class respectability, would never have noticed. His father had worked on the Thornton Ranch until drink got the better of him, and they'd left town in the middle of the night, one step ahead of debts they couldn't pay. After breakfast, Jack examined the porch. The wood was rotted in several places, and the railing was barely attached. It would take a few days to do it right, but he had the skills. He'd learned carpentry working his way up from ranch hand to foreman to owner. His hands remembered the work, even if they were older now. Martha came out as he was measuring boards, a worried expression on her face. "Jack, I need to be honest with you. I can't pay you much. I was thinking room and board, and maybe $20 a day when I can spare it." "I know that's not much, but it's more than fair," Jack interrupted, though the amount was less than he used to spend on a single lunch. "I appreciate the roof over my head and the hot meals, Mrs. Henderson. The rest is just gravy." She looked relieved. "Please, call me Martha. Mrs. Henderson makes me feel old. Only if you call me Jack." She smiled, and for a moment he saw the girl she'd been. Deal. As the days passed, Jack fell into a routine. He worked on the porch in the mornings, broke for lunch, then tackled other projects around the house in the afternoons. The work was satisfying in a way his business dealings had never been. Here, he could see the results of his labor immediately, could feel the honest tiredness in his muscles at the end of the day. Martha worked mornings at the library and spent afternoons doing bookkeeping from home for local businesses, trying to make ends meet. In the evenings, they'd have dinner together, and slowly, carefully, they began to talk about more than just the weather and the work that needed doing. He learned that her daughter Lisa was a nurse in Houston, married with 2 kids Martha rarely got to see. That Tom had been a good man, steady and kind, who'd worked himself to exhaustion trying to provide for his family. That his death had left Martha not just grieving, but nearly destitute, the medical bills having consumed their savings, and then some. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this," Martha said one evening over dinner, looking embarrassed. "You must think I'm pathetic, complaining about my problems to a stranger." "I don't think you're pathetic," Jack said quietly. "I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You've faced hardship that would break most people, and you're still standing. Still kind enough to help someone you don't even know." Martha looked down at her plate, but he saw the color rise in her cheeks. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," Jack said. "Most people wouldn't. Most people would have walked right past me that day." Over the next week, Jack finished the porch and started on the garden, clearing out the weeds and preparing the beds for spring planting. He found himself watching Martha when she didn't know he was looking, noticing the way she hummed while she cooked, how she'd pause to watch the birds at the feeder, the gentleness in her hands when she tended the few flowers that had survived her neglect. One afternoon, while Martha was at work, an expensive black car pulled up in front of the house. Jack's gut clenched as he recognized his attorney, Robert Chun, stepping out. Did he give you documentation? Proof? He's sending papers. Said everything's legitimate, handled through a firm in Dallas. She paused, studying Jack. Do you think it's real? Stranger things have happened, Jack said, guilt eating at him. Maybe you had family you didn't know about. Maybe someone wanted to do a good deed anonymously. Martha nodded slowly, but he could see the suspicion in her eyes, the wheels turning. She was too smart not to question the timing, the convenience of it all. That night, Jack lay awake knowing that the truth was closing in on him from all sides. He could feel the foundation of lies crumbling beneath his feet. Tomorrow he promised himself. Tomorrow he'd tell her everything, face whatever consequences came, and hope that the woman who'd shown kindness to a stranger would find it in her heart to forgive him. But tomorrow came with its own complications, as Jack was about to discover that some secrets refused to stay buried. Jack woke to the sound of multiple cars pulling into the driveway. He glanced at the clock. 6 a.m. His heart hammering, he went to the window and saw 3 vehicles. Lisa's SUV, a truck he didn't recognize, and a sedan with rental plates. Before he could make sense of it, there was pounding on the front door. He pulled on his clothes and hurried downstairs, meeting Martha in the hallway. She looked frightened, pulling her robe tight around herself. What's going on? I don't know, Jack lied, though he had a sinking feeling he knew exactly what was happening. Martha opened the door to find Lisa standing there with 2 men. One was in his 40s, wearing a business suit and an expression of barely controlled anger. The other was older, wearing jeans and a western shirt, a silver belt buckle catching the early morning light. Mom, we need to talk, Lisa said, her voice tight. And he needs to hear this too. Lisa, what is this? Who are these people? I'm David Morrison, the younger man said coldly, his eyes fixed on Jack. And this is Bill Thornton. We're here because your handyman isn't who he says he is. Jack felt the blood drain from his face. David, his son. The son he hadn't spoken to in 2 years, not since their last bitter argument about the business. I'm sorry, Bill said, looking genuinely regretful. I thought I was doing the right thing. I called David because I thought he should know where his father was. I didn't realize, he trailed off, glancing at Lisa. Martha looked between them all, confusion and fear warring on her face. What are you talking about? Jack, what's going on? Maybe you should ask him his full name, David said. Go ahead, Dad. Tell her who you really are. The word Dad hung in the air like an accusation. Martha's eyes widened, and she turned to Jack, waiting. My full name is Jackson Thornton Morrison, Jack said quietly, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. I own Morrison Ranch Holdings. I'm not homeless. I never was. Martha stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe for support. What? I can explain. Explain? David laughed harshly. How do you explain lying to this woman for 2 months? How do you explain pretending to be some vagrant when you're worth more than everyone in this town combined? That's enough, David, Jack said sharply. No, it's not enough. David stepped forward. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? The board thinks you've lost your mind. Your grandchildren ask where you are. Mom, he stopped, his jaw clenching. Mom might be terrible, but she's still my mother, and even she's been worried. This is about your mother? Jack asked incredulously. This is about you running away like a child. This is about you abandoning your responsibilities to play house with. He gestured at Martha, who flinched. Watch yourself, Jack warned, his voice dangerously low. I did some research, Lisa interjected, pulling out her phone. Jackson Morrison, age 63. Widowed, though divorced sounds more accurate. 2 children, David and Sarah. Net worth estimated at over $100 million. Owner of ranches across Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. She looked at her mother. Mom, he's been lying to you this whole time. Martha's face had gone pale. Is this true? All of it? The facts are true, Jack said carefully. But the reasons, Martha, please, let me explain. You're a millionaire, she said slowly, as if testing the words, and you let me feed you my leftovers. You let me worry about paying you $20 a day. Her voice cracked. You let me pour out my heart about my money problems while you're richer than I can even imagine. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Martha's eyes flashed with an anger he'd never seen before. Did you think this was funny? Was this some kind of game? Let's see how the poor widow lives? No. God, no, Martha. Jack reached for her, but she stepped back. I came here because I needed to get away from all of that. The money, the business, the emptiness of it all. I had a heart attack 6 months ago, and my doctor said I was going to die if I didn't change something. So I walked away. I just wanted to know who I was without all the rest of it. And you thought you'd find that here? With me? I didn't plan to find you at all, Jack said desperately. But yes, once I did, once I saw you again. Again? Martha frowned. What do you mean, again? Jack took a breath. This was it, all the truths he should have told months ago. I grew up here, Martha. My father worked on the Thornton Ranch. I went to the same high school you did, though I was just the poor kid nobody noticed. I left right after graduation, couldn't wait to get out and make something of myself. And I did. I built an empire. But I never forgot this place. I never forgot you. Martha stared at him, processing this. You knew who I was? This whole time, you knew who I was, and you didn't say anything? I recognized you that first day. I couldn't believe it when I saw you, but you didn't recognize me. Why would you? I was nobody to you back then. So this was what? Some kind of second chance at a high school crush? The hurt in her voice cut deeper than any anger could have. I trusted you, Jack. I let you into my home, into my life. I told you things I haven't told anyone. And it was all based on a lie. My feelings for you were never a lie, Jack insisted. How can you even say that? How can I believe anything you say? Tears were streaming down Martha's face now. The anonymous trust. That was you too, wasn't it? You thought you could buy my trust? I wanted to help. I don't want your help. I don't want your money. Martha's voice broke. I wanted honesty. I wanted friendship, I thought. I thought maybe I'd found something real. But it was all just another rich man's game. It was never a game to me, Jack said, his own eyes burning. You made me feel like myself again. Like I mattered for who I was, not what I owned. These past 2 months have been the happiest I've been in decades. Well, I'm glad my poverty could provide you with such an authentic experience, Martha said bitterly. Mom, Lisa said gently, putting a hand on her mother's arm. Let's go inside. Let these people leave. Martha nodded, looking suddenly exhausted. I want you gone, she said to Jack. All of you. I want you out of my house. Martha, please. Now, Mr. Morrison. The formality of it, the distance in her voice, was worse than any shouting could have been. Jack looked at her, memorizing her face, knowing he might never see her again. Then he nodded and turned to David. Let's go. Bill Thornton cleared his throat. Martha, for what it's worth, I've known Jack since we were boys. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever mistakes he made, his feelings are real. Martha didn't respond, just turned and walked into the house with Lisa. The door closed with a finality that echoed in Jack's chest. In the truck, David drove while Jack sat silent, staring out the window. I'm sorry, David finally said. I didn't mean for it to go down like that. I was just angry, and when Lisa contacted me, it's fine, Jack said flatly. It's not fine. I can see you care about her. It doesn't matter now. They drove in silence for a while. Then David said, Dad, about Mom, about the divorce. I know I said some things. We're not doing this now, Jack interrupted. Just drive. David pulled up to a hotel in the next town over. I got you a room. Your things are being packed up and will be brought over. I figured you wouldn't want to go back there. Thank you, Jack said, climbing out of the truck. "Dad?" David called as Jack walked toward the hotel entrance. "What are you going to do?" Jack paused. "I don't know, son. I honestly don't know." He spent the next 3 days in the hotel room, ignoring calls from the board, from his attorneys, from everyone. Bill stopped by once, told him that Martha wasn't seeing anyone, that Lisa had taken time off to stay with her mother. "She's hurt," Bill said. "Give her time." "Time for what?" "To hate me more thoroughly?" "Time to get past the shock. Time to maybe realize that your feelings for her were real, even if your circumstances weren't what she thought." But Jack had seen the look in Martha's eyes, the betrayal there. "How did you come back from that?" On the 4th day, Sarah, his daughter, showed up. She was 35, with her mother's dark hair and Jack's blue eyes. She'd always been the peacemaker in the family, the one who tried to smooth over the conflicts between Jack and David, between Jack and their mother. "David told me what happened," she said, sitting across from him in the hotel room. "Dad, you really made a mess of this. I know, but I also know you. You wouldn't have stayed there, wouldn't have lied for so long if you didn't have real feelings for her." Sarah leaned forward. "Do you love her?" Jack had been avoiding that question, even in his own mind. But sitting here, with everything lost, there was no point in lying anymore. "Yes, I think I've loved her since I was 17 years old. I just didn't realize it until I saw her again. Then you have to fight for her. You have to make this right." "How?" "She doesn't want to see me. She doesn't trust me." "I don't blame her." Sarah smiled sadly. "You built a ranching empire from nothing, Dad. You faced down droughts and disease, market crashes and hostile takeovers. Are you really going to let this defeat you?" After she left, Jack sat with her words. She was right. He'd spent his whole life fighting for what he wanted, building what he needed. The only difference was that this time, what he wanted couldn't be bought or built. It had to be earned. And earning Martha's forgiveness was going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done. Martha stood at her kitchen window, looking out at the porch Jack had repaired, the garden he'd tended, the fence he'd mended. Every corner of her property bore his mark, and every mark felt like an accusation. How could she have been so foolish? So trusting? "You need to eat, Mom," Lisa said, setting a sandwich on the table. Her daughter had been staying with her for a week now, treating her like she was fragile, breakable. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't been hungry for days," Lisa sighed. "Look, I know he hurt you. But starving yourself isn't going to change anything." Martha turned from the window. "Did you know I was starting to have feelings for him? Real feelings. For the first time since your father died, I was thinking about maybe, possibly, opening my heart again." She laughed bitterly. "God, I feel like such a fool." "You're not a fool for trusting someone," Lisa said gently, her attitude toward the situation having softened over the past days. "He's the one who messed up, not you." "But why? That's what I can't understand. Why would someone with all that money, all that success, pretend to be homeless? Why would he lie to me?" A knock at the door interrupted them. Martha's heart jumped, hoping and dreading in equal measure that it might be Jack. But when Lisa answered, it was Bill Thornton standing there, hat in hand. "Mrs. Henderson, I wonder if I might have a word?" Martha considered sending him away, but curiosity won out. She invited him in, offered coffee that he accepted. "I owe you an apology," Bill started. "I'm the one who told David where Jack was. I thought I was doing the right thing, thought his family had a right to know. But I didn't realize," he paused, "I didn't realize what was really happening here." "What was happening here was a lie," Martha said. "Was it?" Bill asked. "Let me tell you about Jack Morrison. We grew up together, sort of. His daddy worked for my daddy on the ranch. Jack was the smartest kid I ever knew, but his family didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. When they left town, I heard Jack ended up in Montana, working cattle. Next thing I knew, he owned half the ranches in the state." Bill set down his coffee cup. Over the years, I'd hear about him, always through business channels, never personal. Built an empire, married some socialite, had kids. But I also heard the other stories, how he worked 18-hour days, how his marriage fell apart, how his kids barely knew him, how he had a heart attack and kept working from his hospital bed. Martha listened, unwilling to feel sympathy but unable to stop herself from being curious. Then, a few months ago, I heard he disappeared. Just walked away from everything. His business partners were frantic. His ex-wife was threatening lawsuits. His kids didn't know if he was alive or dead. Bill looked at Martha directly. Then I saw him here, fixing your porch, and I recognized him. Barely, but I did. And you know what I saw in his face? Peace. For the first time in probably 40 years, Jack Morrison looked at peace. That doesn't excuse the lies, Martha said. No, it doesn't, Bill agreed. But it might explain them. Sometimes a man gets so lost in what he's built that he forgets who he is underneath. And sometimes, when he tries to find himself again, he makes a mess of it. After Bill left, Martha sat with his words. She thought about the Jack she'd known, the man who'd worked hard and laughed easily, who'd listened to her stories about Tom without jealousy, who'd made her feel seen and valued. Had that man been real, or was it all an act? That night, unable to sleep, Martha went up to the guest room. Jack's things were gone, picked up by his people days ago, but something made her check the closet anyway. There, hanging on a hook on the back of the closet door, was Tom's old flannel shirt, the one Jack had worn that first night. She took it down, held it to her face, and was surprised to find Jack's scent still on it, mixed with the faint smell of sawdust and the outdoors. And there, in the pocket, she found a folded piece of paper. It was old, the paper yellowed and creased from years of folding and unfolding. She opened it carefully and found herself looking at a photograph, the kind they used to take for the high school yearbook. A young man, barely 17, skinny and serious, stared at the camera. Below the photo, in faded ink, someone had written Jackson Morrison, class of 1980. But it was what was paper-clipped to the photo that made Martha's breath catch. Another photograph, this one even older, torn from what looked like a yearbook page. It was a picture of the homecoming court, and there, standing in the back row in a borrowed dress, was 17-year-old Martha Sullivan. Her hands shook as she stared at the two photographs. He'd kept these for over 40 years, carried them with him through his whole life, through his marriage and success and everything else. She remembered that homecoming. She'd been so excited to be chosen, even though she wasn't the queen. It had been one of the happiest nights of her teenage life. Had Jack been there? She couldn't remember him, couldn't picture him in the crowd. But he'd remembered her. All these years he'd remembered. The next morning, Martha made a decision. She called the number on the card Bill Thornton had left her. I need to talk to him, she said when Bill answered. Can you tell me where he is? He's at the hotel in Redford, Bill said. But Martha, you should know his daughter is trying to convince him to go back to Montana. She says he needs to face his responsibilities. When? They're leaving tomorrow morning. Martha hung up and turned to Lisa, who'd been listening from the doorway. I need to borrow your car. Mom, are you sure about this? Martha looked at her daughter, at the concern in her eyes. No, but I need to hear it from him, the truth, all of it. I need to know if any of it was real. The hotel was a 30-minute drive. Martha's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing through everything she wanted to say, every question she needed to ask. But when she knocked on the door of room 247, all her prepared speeches fled. Jack opened the door, and she saw the shock in his face, followed by something that looked like hope. He'd aged in the past week, new lines around his eyes, his shoulders slumped in a way she'd never seen. Martha, he breathed. Can I come in? He stepped aside wordlessly, and she entered the generic hotel room. Suitcases sat by the door, already packed. You're leaving, she said. Tomorrow. My daughter thinks I've been running long enough. He tried to smile. She's probably right. Why did you keep these? Martha pulled out the photographs, watching his face. Jack's expression crumbled. Where did you find those? In the pocket of Tom's shirt. The one you wore that first night. She laid them on the table between them. Why, Jack? He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. Do you remember Billy Chun? He used to run the Chinese restaurant on Main Street? Martha nodded, confused by the apparent change of subject. His son was in our class. We were friends, sort of. Both of us outsiders for different reasons. He took that picture of you at homecoming, gave me a copy because he knew. Jack stopped, swallowed. Because everyone knew I had a crush on the prettiest girl in school. The one who didn't know I existed. Jack, let me finish, please. I've got 40 years of truth to tell you, and if I don't say it now, I never will. He took a breath. I was going to talk to you that night. Billy convinced me to do it. But when I saw you there, so beautiful, so far out of my league, I couldn't. I just stood in the corner and watched you dance and laugh. And I knew I needed to be someone different, someone better, before I could ever approach you. So I left, went to Montana and worked like a man possessed. Every time I bought a new ranch, every time I expanded, I told myself it was about building something, about proving I was more than my father's son. But really, I think I was trying to become someone worthy of the girl in that photograph. Martha felt tears on her cheeks. You were worthy. You were always worthy. Was I? I built an empire, but I destroyed a marriage. I made millions, but I barely knew my own children. I had everything I thought I wanted, and I was miserable. He looked at her finally. Then I had a heart attack. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized I'd wasted my whole life chasing something that didn't matter. So I walked away. I just started driving, no destination in mind, and I ended up here. Back where it all started. And you saw me, Martha said softly. And I saw you, still beautiful, still kind, but worn down by life, just like me. And when you offered to help me, when you took me in, it felt like a second chance. Not just with you, but with myself. A chance to be the man I should have been all along, without the money and the power and all the rest of it. So you lied to me. Yes, Jack admitted, and that was wrong. I should have told you the truth that first day, or the second day, or any of the 53 days I spent in your home. But I was a coward. I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you'd see all the failures instead of the man I was trying to be. Martha sat down across from him. Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the money or the lie about being homeless. It was that you knew who I was, and you let me pour out my heart to you about Tom, about my struggles, about everything, and you never once told me you'd known me before. You let me think we were strangers when we weren't. We were strangers, Jack said. That's what I realized. You didn't know me back then, and I didn't really know you. I just knew the idea of you. But these past 2 months, I got to know the real Martha Henderson. The woman who sings while she cooks and talks to the birds and still believes in helping people even when the world hasn't been kind to her. And that woman is even more remarkable than the girl I remembered. How do I know that's true? How do I know any of this is real? Jack stood and walked to his suitcase, pulling out a folder. This is the trust I set up for you. I'm signing it over to you completely, no strings attached. You never have to see me again, never have to wonder about my motives. The money is yours. It's the least I can do after lying to you. Martha stared at the papers. I don't want your money, Jack. I know. That's one of the things I love about you. The words hung in the air between them. I love you, Martha. I think I've loved you since I was 17, but I definitely love you now. The real you, not some memory or fantasy. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I messed up in ways I can't fix. But I needed you to know that every moment I spent with you was real. My feelings were real. The happiest I've been in my entire life was sitting on that porch with you, watching the sunset and talking about nothing important. Martha felt her resistance crumbling. She'd been so angry, so hurt, but looking at him now, seeing the truth in his eyes, she realized something. "I love you too," she said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "And I'm furious with you. Both things are true." Jack's face lit up with hope, then fell. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. That's the thing about love," Martha said. "It's not always convenient or logical. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment or the ideal circumstances. Sometimes it just happens even when you're not looking for it, even when the other person is an idiot who can't tell the truth to save his life." "I am an idiot," Jack agreed. "A very rich idiot, apparently." "Money doesn't make you happy," Jack said. "I spent 40 years proving that. You know what made me happy? Fixing your porch. Making you smile. Feeling like I mattered for who I was, not what I owned." Martha stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "If we're going to have any chance at this, things have to be different. No more lies. No more secrets. I need complete honesty, even when it's hard." "You have it," Jack said immediately. "I swear to you, no more lies. And we do this slowly. We start over, really start over. You court me properly, like we're two people who just met and are trying to figure out if we fit. I can do that." Jack moved to stand beside her, careful not to touch. "Though for the record, I already know we fit." "Maybe we do," Martha admitted. "But I need to trust that again, and trust takes time." "I have time," Jack said. "I have all the time in the world." Martha turned to him finally, seeing the man she'd fallen for and the man he actually was, trying to reconcile the two. "Your daughter is right, you know. You do have responsibilities. A business, employees who depend on you. You can't just walk away from all that. I can delegate. I can work remotely." "I can." "No," Martha interrupted. "You need to go back. You need to make things right with your family, with your business. And I need time to think about all of this, to process it without you standing in front of me making me feel things I'm not ready to feel yet." Jack's face fell, but he nodded. "Okay, if that's what you need." "It is." She pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down her number. "But you can call me once a week. And maybe, if things go well, you can visit sometimes." "We'll see. I'll take it," Jack said, accepting the paper like it was made of gold. "Martha, thank you. For listening, for not shutting the door completely, for—" "Don't thank me yet," Martha said. "I haven't forgiven you. I'm just not closing the door. There's a difference. I'll prove myself to you," Jack promised. "However long it takes." Martha left the hotel room feeling lighter than she had in days. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she and Jack could really make this work. But she knew she wanted to try. Because sometimes second chances came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the boy you never noticed in high school grew up to be the man you'd been waiting for all along. 6 months later, Martha stood on her newly renovated porch, watching a truck pull into her driveway. Jack climbed out, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers he'd clearly picked himself. "You're late," she called out, unable to keep the smile off her face. "I know. There was an issue at the Wyoming property that needed my attention. But I'm here now." He climbed the porch steps and handed her the flowers. "Worth the wait?" "Maybe," Martha said, but she was already pulling him into a kiss. In the months since that day at the hotel, Jack had been true to his word. He'd gone back to Montana, sorted out his business affairs, and set up a management structure that let him work remotely. He'd made peace with his children, finally having the honest conversations that had been overdue for years. He'd even reached an accord with his ex-wife, settling old grievances and moving forward. And every week, he'd called Martha. They talked for hours, really talked, learning each other in ways they hadn't been able to when he was living in her guest room. He'd visited twice, staying at the hotel in Redford, courting her properly with dinners and movies and long walks. This was his third visit, and this time Martha had invited him to stay in the guest room again. Not as a homeless stranger, but as the man she was falling in love with all over again. "I have something to show you," Jack said, pulling back from the kiss. He led her to the truck and opened the passenger door, revealing blueprints spread across the seat. "I've been thinking. I have all these ranches, all this property, but none of it feels like home. So I talked to an architect about building something here near you. Not too close, I'm not assuming anything, but close enough that I could be here more often." Martha looked at the blueprints, seeing a beautiful house designed to blend with the Texas landscape. "Jack, you can't just uproot your whole life for me." "Why not?" "I did it once before, and it led me to 40 years of success I didn't know how to enjoy. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. Maybe it's time to build a life instead of an empire. What about your business?" "I'll still run it, just from here instead of Montana. The beauty of the 21st century is you can work from anywhere." He took her hands. "Martha, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I know we're still rebuilding trust. But I'm asking if you'd be okay with me being around more. Being part of your life, your community, your world." Martha thought about it, about the man he'd been and the man he was becoming, about second chances and new beginnings, about love that waited 40 years and might just be worth it. "I'd be okay with that," she said. "More than okay." Lisa pulled up then, with Martha's grandchildren in the back seat. They'd driven in from Houston for the weekend, and Jack had arranged to meet them properly this time. David and Sarah were coming tomorrow, a family dinner where everyone could start fresh. As Martha watched Jack greet her grandchildren, saw him swing her grandson up onto his shoulders while her granddaughter peppered him with questions about his ranch, she felt something settle in her chest. This was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and earned and worth fighting for. That evening, after the kids were in bed and Lisa had retired to the guest room, Martha and Jack sat on the porch swing he'd installed during his last visit. The stars were bright overhead, and the night was warm with the promise of spring. "Do you ever regret it?" Martha asked. "Walking away from everything, ending up here?" Jack pulled her closer. "Not for a single second. I spent 40 years building an empire and being miserable. I'd rather spend the rest of my life building a home with you, even though I'm not the girl you remember from high school." "Especially because you're not," Jack said. "That girl was a dream. You're real. You're better." Martha rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "For the lies, for the secrets, for all of it. I forgive you." Jack's arm tightened around her. "I don't deserve it. Maybe not. But I'm giving it to you anyway. That's what love is, Jack. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing every day to see the best in someone and help them become that person." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, two people who'd taken the long way around to finding each other. And as the night deepened and the first hints of dawn began to color the eastern sky, Martha knew that sometimes the best stories weren't the ones that started perfectly. They were the ones that started with mistakes and misunderstandings, with secrets and lies, but ended with forgiveness and love and the courage to try again. Jack Morrison had come to her as a homeless stranger, hiding a fortune and a past. But he'd left his heart in her keeping, and that was worth more than all the ranches in Montana. And Martha Henderson, who thought her chance at love had died with Tom, discovered that the heart was capable of expanding, of holding both the memory of what was and the hope of what could be. As the sun rose over the Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Jack and Martha sat together on the porch he'd built, planning a future neither of them had expected, but both of them had earned. And in the small town where their story had begun 40 years ago, in the very place where Jack had once been too afraid to speak his heart, they finally came home.